Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Lori Johnson.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. U.S. authorities have arrested a supporter of ISIS, accusing him of plotting to bomb the U.S. Capitol. That comes as France continues to investigate the recent terror attacks in Paris. Both examples highlight a growing concern that more Islamic jihadists around the world are beginning to model themselves after ISIS. Caitlin Burke has this story.
An Ohio man is behind bars today, accused of plotting a homegrown terror attack. Authorities say he wanted to wage jihad in the U.S., inspired by al-Qaeda and ISIS.
You wouldn't think Cincinnati, Ohio, jihadists in the same sentence.
According to the FBI, the plan was a deadly assault on the U.S. Capitol building and members of Congress. The suspect was arrested Wednesday after buying 2 M15 assault rifles and 600 rounds of ammunition. He's identified as 20-year-old Christopher Lee Cornell. Authorities say he publicly supported the Islamic State, and he'd been posting disturbing messages on Twitter. One stated, "I believe we should just wage jihad under our own orders and plan attacks." A beginner's hand guide to Islam was among the things taken from Cornell's apartment.
He had just recently converted to Islam, and he had been talking about it for a few months. He's a good kid. He's been kind of lost.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's homegrown Islamic extremist group Boko Haram is also acting more like ISIS, declaring an Islamic caliphate and launching widespread attacks across countries in East Africa. Girls as young as 10 are being used as suicide bombers, and the number of attacks are increasing. In one of their most recent attacks, jihadis massacred up to 2,000 people. Despite the deadly terrorism in Paris and the Muslim attacks and violence around the world, the White House still refuses to use the words radical Islam to describe the terrorists, even when they themselves say they're acting on behalf of Islam and Mohammed. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
The latest version of Charlie Hebdo magazine is flying off the shelves in France. That's the magazine terrorists targeted last week in Paris. The Muslim attackers wanted to silence Charlie Hebdo because it printed cartoons that blasted Mohammed. But instead of shutting down, the magazine ramped up to print 5 million copies of a special edition. They normally print only 100,000 copies at the most, but they've sold out before dawn for 2 days straight.
I wanted to buy this magazine in support for the team who has been murdered last week. I know that their work is very important for the freedom of speech, and that's the reason why I wanted to buy it.
The new issue of Charlie Hebdo defiantly shows a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad on the cover once again.
The state of Israel honored and buried 4 Jewish victims murdered last week in Islamic terror attacks in Paris. Their deaths were just the latest example of a spike in anti-Semitic violence in France. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports now from Jerusalem.
Israel's leaders, including the Prime Minister, the President, and the Mayor of Jerusalem, paid respects to the family and friends of the victims.
This is not how we wanted you to arrive in the land of Israel. This is not how we wanted to see you come home to the state of Israel and to Jerusalem, its capital. We wanted you alive. We wanted for you life.
During the service, one rabbi read from Psalm 130, which says in part, "Out of the depths I cry unto you, O Lord." It reflected the feeling of many who came here to honor the dead.
There's no word. There's no word. I can't tell you anything. I'm just feeling pain, and there's no word.
The Women's International Zionist Organization reported a rise of anti-Semitism around the world and in France.
We saw now that we can die because we are Jewish in France now, and this feeling is a really bad feeling. We are really sad for all the Jewish community.
Many feel the terror attacks will accelerate the immigration, known in Hebrew as Aliyah, of French Jews to Israel.
Indeed, this is our homeland, and as much as we can fear the rockets and the random acts of terror, it's the most safe place because we know that we are protected by the government, we are protected by each other, and Am Yisrael Chai.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the only true home the one Jewish state and the hope of the Jewish people is the land of Israel. It's his call for the Jews of France and the world to come home. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Har HaMenahot Cemetery, Jerusalem.
The second phase of jury selection for the trial of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev begins today. The judge overseeing the trial will begin individually questioning about 40 prospective jurors until there are enough people to move to the final phase of jury selection. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for the Boston bombing suspect. He's the youngest of the two men accused of the 2013 attack, where 3 people were killed and more than 200 people were hurt. Last week, more than 1,300 people filled out lengthy juror questionnaires.
The U.S. Department of Defense has released 5 Yemeni terror suspects from Guantanamo Bay. They were captured more than 12 years ago in Pakistan and detained as suspected al-Qaeda fighters. One man has now been sent to Estonia and the other 4 have been sent to Amman. This marks the first time either country has agreed to accept Guantanamo prisoners. This latest release brings the number of detainees at Guantanamo down to 122.
Mexico's government will start issuing birth certificates to its citizens at consulates in the United States. The move is aimed at helping Mexican immigrants living in the U.S. illegally. It would help them apply for work permits, driver's licenses, and protect them from being deported. The move comes as Republicans are trying to pass legislation reversing President Obama's executive order on immigration. On Wednesday, House Republicans passed a bill that could lead to the deportation of thousands of young immigrants from the U.S. The bill is now going to the Senate.
Well, if you've ever had to deal with the IRS, you know it can be frustrating. Well, prepare yourself. It's going to get a lot worse. The IRS is cutting services offered to customers. They say it's because of budget cuts enacted by Congress. This couldn't have come at a worse time. Obamacare is making filing taxes a whole lot more complicated. The IRS just simply will not provide enough people on the phones to answer everyone's questions. Critics say that will likely lead to costly mistakes when people file their taxes, or some people will be so confused they won't file at all.
As the death toll from the flu continues to rise, almost every state is reporting widespread outbreaks. Doctors say a new antiviral medicine could make a big difference. Nearly 30 children have died from the flu so far this season, including 5-year-old Scarlett Taylor of Tacoma, Washington.
I feel like, if I would have known more about this flu, maybe I would have taken her to the doctors on Wednesday instead of Friday.
The flu vaccine does not protect against the strain of flu Scarlett had, H3N2, which is sweeping the country. Antiviral medications like Tamiflu and Relenza can reduce the severity of the flu. There are a couple catches. You need a prescription, and you should start taking them within 2 days of developing symptoms. Flu symptoms include fever, aches, and fatigue. People who benefit the most from antivirals are those at greatest risk of dying from the flu, people over 65 and the very young. Also, folks with chronic issues like diabetes, asthma, and heart disease. And one of the best ways to prevent getting the flu in the first place is to wash those hands and strengthen your immune system, too, by doing things like getting a lot of sleep and getting vitamins, whether it's in your food or with supplements, C, D, and all the other, a good multivitamin.
Excellent. Great advice. Great advice. Well, stay with us. Coming up, teens are being brainwashed and lured away to wage jihad against America. We're going to show you where it's happening. Coming up next.
Major changes for the Secret Service. 4 high-ranking executives have been reassigned after a string of security breaches. This marks the biggest leadership shift since the agency's director was forced to quit last year. The acting director, Joseph Clancy, said in a statement, "Change is necessary to gain a fresh perspective on how we conduct business." He's vowing to make things right.
And restore the Secret Service's rightful place as the most respected protection service in the world.
So far, the White House has not commented on the Secret Service shakeup.
Which city is America's biggest hotbed for terrorists? If you're thinking New York or Los Angeles, you are wrong. Think Middle America. Dozens of young men and women have left Minneapolis-St. Paul in recent years to join Islamic terrorist groups like ISIS. Eric Stakelbeck has more.
American men and women, all of them Somali Muslims hailing from Minnesota, and all of them carrying U.S. passports. Some have been suicide bombers. Others star in propaganda videos. Their exodus from the Twin Cities began in 2007 with a call to jihad in Somalia. Today, their destination is the Islamic State.
The problem in previous years for the Somali Muslim community here in Minneapolis was young men leaving mosques like this to travel back home and join the al-Qaeda-linked terror group Al-Shabaab. Now the problem has shifted, and it's much deeper.
Since July of 2012, we haven't had any kids leave to go join Al-Shabaab, but we have had several leave now to go join ISIS.
Bob Fletcher is the former sheriff of Ramsey County, which includes the city of St. Paul.
What ISIS is selling now is an opportunity to build something, to build a new society, and that's very, very exciting for a lot of kids.
At least 12 Twin Cities residents have traveled to Syria to join terrorist groups in recent years. All were Somalis, except Douglas McCain, an African-American convert killed fighting alongside ISIS last summer. One Somali-American ISIS recruit even worked at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport before joining the Islamic State.
The recruiters get hold of these young people. They mentor them. They assess them. They identify them.
Abdurazak Bihi is director of the Somali Advocacy Center in Minneapolis. His teenage nephew fell prey to terrorist recruiters and was killed in Somalia in 2008.
Nobody would believe that a Somali-American kid who grew up here had nothing to do with Somalia, no cultural or anything or language, would be brainwashed, radicalized by the same people, by some of the people we trusted so much, and return him to hellfire in Somalia.
Bihi has received threats for speaking out against the radicalization of his Somali Muslim community. He says he's fighting an uphill battle here as unemployed young people respond to the message of jihad.
We are trying with everything we can, but our challenges are plenty because we don't have the resources to work with. It's zero.
The Twin Cities are home to the largest Somali population in North America. Many of the more than 100,000 Somali residents came as part of a taxpayer-funded refugee resettlement program run by the U.S. government. Assimilation has been a major problem. A large number live in neighborhoods like Little Mogadishu.
This is a traditional East African market. It's the kind you'd see in Somalia, but it's here in the very heart of Minneapolis, and it shows the changing face and the growth of the Somali community here in the Twin Cities.
War-torn Somalia has had no functioning central government for nearly 25 years and has become a hotbed for radical Islam. Somali community activist Omar Jamal left behind that chaos only to confront a similar menace in the Twin Cities. He says terror recruiters are having success beyond just the high school dropout types.
The idea has always been ISIS and even Al-Shabaab target those kids. But we later came to find out that even A students in universities and colleges are also vulnerable to this powerful propaganda machine.
According to Jamal, radical Islamic ideology is a powerful recruitment tool for ISIS, and the Islamic State's success breeds attraction.
ISIS thus far succeeded in putting up an image where they are righting the wrongs and respecting the Muslim world, bring respect back, and it's working for them.
Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Minneapolis.
So is Islam being hijacked, or are extremists just following the Quran? Here's one verse worth noting. Surah 47:4 of the Quran is the clear underpinning for 21st century beheadings that have shocked the world. It says, quote, "When you meet those who misbelieve, non-Muslims, while fighting in jihad, cut off their heads until you have massacred them." You can find out more truth about Islam at cbnnews.com.
Up next, a marriage on the rocks. See how this couple's marriage was saved and how what they learned can help you and your spouse. If you want to keep your heart healthy, try being optimistic. A new study finds people who are the most optimistic have twice the odds of having ideal cardiovascular health compared to those who were pessimistic. Researchers studied more than 5,000 adults between the ages of 45 and 84 over the course of 11 years, and they found optimists also had significantly better blood sugar and total cholesterol levels. So staying optimistic can help you not only emotionally, but your physical health as well.
Amen to that.
Well, Angel Davis was so miserable in her marriage, she actually looked forward to her husband dying, but not anymore.
Now, the Christian psychotherapist believes it is possible to fix a broken marriage no matter how bad it seems, and all it takes is you. Paul Strand brings us this encouraging story of how one spouse can save a marriage.
Angel Davis expected the perfect Christian marriage with husband Lee, but when he didn't measure up to all her expectations and wouldn't put up with her trying to change him, she began fantasizing a way out.
Because I'm a Christian, I didn't think divorce was an option. So I felt stuck and trapped. And I even thought about him dying because I felt like that was the only way out. That's how dark my heart had gotten.
That was probably the thing that hurt me the most.
Lee believes Angel should never have been depending on him for things humans just can't deliver at the deepest level.
Your spouse can't make you happy. And if you are waiting for that, you're probably going to be waiting forever.
This Christian psychotherapist says she even began to listen to Satan's twisted logic for why her marriage should end.
I got to the point where I thought if I left my husband, I could do more for the Lord.
But then a friend brought Angel to a life-changing moment.
She looked me in the eye and she said, Angel, where in the Bible does it say you can do this for the reason you want to do this? And I knew the word. And so it was like cold water in my face.
That's when she truly surrendered her marriage and herself to God, and he began planting in her heart the principles of how one spouse can save a troubled marriage and change their husband or wife the right way.
What therapist Angel Davis has shown hundreds of people here in her office, and now in her book, The Perfecting Storm, is the secret to changing your spouse for the better. Rest in changing you first.
Angel witnessed a radical example of this when her friends Ron and Carrie were tottering on the edge of divorce after Carrie found out Ron was having an affair and didn't really want to change. But Carrie, though bitterly hurt and not wanting to forgive Ron, put herself before God and heard him tell her this about Ron.
I was to take him back, and we were to forge a path of reconciliation.
Ron's sexual sins had cost him his job and his home, and he was expecting to lose his family. But then Carrie told him what she'd heard from God and that she was going to grit her teeth and obey.
For her to be obedient to that, despite the fact that she was undergoing so much pain and so much hurt, all I could do was, in all honesty, I lost it. I mean, I just broke down and sobbed in front of her.
He's extremely grateful because he knows that I basically gave him a gift that he did not deserve.
Carrie's willingness to bend and change led Ron to wanting to bend and change too. It's been several years since Ron's affair and Carrie's taking him back, and now they say their 29-year marriage is better than ever.
When you put aside your feelings and put aside your arguments and say, you know what, I'm going to obey God like she did, radical things happen.
It is possible for your marriage to be restored. It is possible to fall in love with your husband once again.
Meanwhile, Angel was practicing the same things Carrie had done when Ron and Carrie's marriage seemed doomed, like letting God change her rather than insisting husband Lee change, like receiving inner healing that she says most of us need, like beginning to show Lee real respect because God said to.
And guess what? He started acting in ways that I had longed for him to act all those years.
All this takes learning to hear God's voice and obey his marching orders.
It just gives certainty, gives security, gives direction, and he's talking all the time, and we're hardwired to hear his voice, but we got to figure out how to hear it. He is the still small voice, and he speaks in many different ways.
God taught her real enemy wasn't Lee, but the devil who wants to kill and destroy marriages.
I had been looking at my husband as the enemy, and it was like God took that veil off, and I saw I'm fighting the wrong battle.
As Angel's been teaching and sharing these principles around her Athens, Georgia area, and through the Perfecting Storm, others have seen their marriages profit, like Clay and Debbie Huckabee.
I finally stopped spending so much time worrying about what Clay was doing, and I started working on my own self.
and get my own act together.
I don't think it's ever been better, and I feel like that's largely due to her, but because we've gotten to where we enjoy working at it.
Friend Leslie McCullough is so enthusiastic about the Perfecting Storm, she and her husband have been selling it at their place, Brett's Restaurant. Angel had to keep interrupting her lunch with us there to sign copies. She's just not an excited author, though. She believes with all her heart in what she's written because she's seen it radically affect her own marriage and so many of those around her.
If you'll break before God and learn to listen to His voice, Angel guarantees He'll give you His divine guidance and His plans to make your marriage work. Then you really will have a marriage made in heaven. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Athens, Georgia.
And I know it may be hard to believe, but it's clear it does only take one person to start that process.
That is so encouraging because there are so many people out there who just want to throw in the towel.
That's right. Stick it out. Stick it out. You can make a difference.
And we'll be right back after this commercial break. Finally today, an incredible story out of Yosemite National Park.
Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen became the first to free climb the 3,000-foot granite pedestal of El Capitan, a feat that many considered impossible. It took the pair 18 days to complete the climb, and the men only used their hands and feet. At one point, Kevin wasn't sure if he could get through one of the toughest sections of the climb.
I was pretty devastated, and thoughts crossed my mind that I should just throw in the towel and support Tommy to the top.
But after 6 days and 11 attempts, he made it. Friends and family were waiting above and watching from below as the two made it to the top of the climbing world. Wow. I've watched that over and over again.
You like to look at that. See, now to me, when I look at that, it just makes me nervous even just to watch it. And I know how it ends, but it just makes me queasy. People shouldn't be on those rocks.
I know. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Have a great day, everyone.